Good evening and welcome to the Pullman City Council meeting for this Tuesday, May 3rd. Nice to have you here. And Dee, would you please call roll?
Mayor Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Benjamin.
Present.
Councilmember Dubin.
Here.
Councilmember Guido.
Here.
Councilmember McCall.
Here.
Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
Under announcements tonight, the proposed final redistricting map is available to the public for review. Comments will be accepted through May 24th. You can visit our Pullman website and just /redistricting. WSU commencement is this Saturday, and commencement brings an influx of WSU families and friends from all over come out to support Cougar grads. And of course, we haven't had one for the last couple of years, so it's nice to have all the grads coming back and the families as well. So Pullman residents should expect more auto and pedestrian traffic. Keep that welcoming spirit out there. To prep for commencement, M&O has started repainting the Coug Spirit mark, so you see the white there right now, and the Coug logo is coming shortly. Afterwards, they'll begin touching up with the street markings around the city, beginning with the downtown district. Lawson Gardens plant sale is Saturday, May 14th, from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. at 705 Southeast Derby Street. Parks and Rec Activities Guide will be mailed out last week. Registration is open on 5/2. It was May 2nd. And we heard from Megan Vining on Monday that people were on the line at midnight to register to make sure they had their kids in right away. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. That's the week of May 10th to the 16th. The National Association uses this time to bring voices together to advocate for mental health. Public Services Recognition Week is May 1st to the 7th. We're featuring our impactful team members in the city of Pullman on our social media accounts all week long. Community College Month. Pullman has Spokane Falls Community College on the WSU campus. May 6th is Child Care Provider Appreciation Day. We issued a proclamation for that, urging residents to recognize child care providers for their important work. Over half the children under the age of 6, and this is nationwide, are estimated to spend some time with a non-parental care arrangement on a weekly basis. And the week of May 15th is Emergency Medical Services Week. Issued a proclamation for that as well, acknowledging the members of the Emergency Medical Services team, providing life-saving care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and no holidays off, consisting of emergency physicians, emergency nurses, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, firefighters, educators, administrators, and others. And just a reminder, May 8th is Mother's Day. And with those announcements, we now go to the presentations on planned unit development. And our Community Development Department Director, R.J. Lott.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. This is a pretty exciting topic for staff. I'm happy to be here to present this to the City Council this evening. So this topic this evening is planned unit developments. You may ask yourself right off the top, what is a planned unit development? Simply put, it's a vehicle that drives development that can be more than just commercial, more than just residential. And right now we really don't have those opportunities to provide to folks that want to invest in our community. So it's used to describe a type of development and the regulatory process that permits a developer to meet the overall community density if it's in a residential zone and land use goals without being bound by existing zoning requirements. And I'll get into that a little bit later. It's a special type of floating overlay district. There's that term from late last year, you may recall, which generally does not appear on a municipal zoning map. So for instance, we have planned residential developments. We have a couple near Kamiak Elementary that council has approved in the last year or so. This may include provisions to encourage clustering of buildings, designation of common open space, incorporation of a variety of building types, and mixed land uses. A PUD is a planned and built as a unit all at once, similar to a planned residential development, which fixes the type of and location and uses of buildings over the entire project. So what is an example of a planned unit development? In this photo, this is something you may find more of in a high-end area. So in this photo, you've got first floor commercial, second and third floor would be residential. So typical uses that you could put on the first floor could be a coffee shop, corner coffee shop, a sandwich shop, a barber, something small. PUDs can include a neighborhood pool or a playground, corner markets like I mentioned, residential development, coffee shop, hiking and biking trails, and so on. So when is a PUD utilized? It's really utilized in times when traditional zoning, like I mentioned, ours are very compartmentalized, residential in some areas, commercial in others. So it's used when traditional zoning doesn't have the flexibility to address the need of mixed uses. For instance, changes in building setbacks, active transportation such as biking and walking, environmental protection of wetlands or other critical areas, possible brownfield regulations, we don't have too many of those here, all within a confined space. The area for redevelopment is planned all at once, as mentioned earlier, so land uses can be judged against each other so that they're compatible. For instance, we wouldn't want to have residential next to heavy equipment repair, just they're not compatible. Whereas perhaps residential, like in the photo prior, may be compatible with a sandwich or donut shop. Using a PUD allows for innovative uses of spaces and structures to achieve our planning goals, which may appear in our comprehensive plan, which we adopted last year. A planned residential development is sort of a type of a PUD, but there's similarities and there's differences, and I'll get into that later also. So how is a planned residential, or a planned unit development, created? It's very similar to a planned residential development. We create ordinances that create those overlays that would allow for certain uses in certain locations. The municipality, such as the city of Pullman, would have adopted zoning and subdivision ordinances, which we already have in place, and should have them identified in a comprehensive plan. While a PUD allows for flexible project design, there are certain standards to protect public health and safety and to assure design quality and conformance to an overall plan. Now, going back to our planned residential developments, which we have near Kamiak Elementary, this last bullet point is ensured through our site plan review process, which is done internally with city staff. So as mentioned, it's the same general process as a PRD. It would go through the site plan review. It would go through a public hearing before the Planning Commission. Planning Commission would provide a recommendation to City Council. Same process as a planned residential development. We'd also offer a pre-application conference, which we highly encourage, so that both the staff and the developer know exactly what's coming, exactly what's expected, what the timelines are, what the possible costs may be. Site plan review, as I mentioned, consists of a detailed site analysis on existing features, could include a walkabout of the site and a discussion about project goals and possible design solutions. The preliminary development plan would include specific documents and maps, which would be presented to council, giving a legal description of the project, a detailed site plan, and supporting maps. The final development plan, which would also come before council, would contain detailed engineered drawings of the entire site and process for completion of the project. The entire site plan for the PUD would be reviewed as a single entity, so all at once, not broken up into pieces. So if a developer came in with a 10-acre, let's say, development, the residential, the commercial components would be reviewed all at once, not part of it today, part of it 5 years from now. PUDs would generally have density allowances depending upon the underlying residential zone, if it's located in a residential zone. So for instance, we have existing densities in the R2 district. Those would still be enforced. However, there would be density increases, or there could be density increases, such as offered in those for the PRDs based upon energy consumption, open space, recreational facilities, or additional design features. Similar density bonuses and elements for a PUD could include open space, design factors, so we could include certain design elements that may not appear otherwise, or other amenities other than parks or open spaces or biking and hiking trails. So the benefits of a planned unit development, like I said, greater flexibility, both for the developer, the investor, and also for staff, so that we can combine some of those commercial areas close to residential areas, make a more walkable community. It creates a work-live environment. It gives the opportunity for someone owning a retail barbershop, let's say, to live above and not have to drive across town. Allows for more density if certain conditions are met, encourages a holistic development of a neighborhood. Some of the drawbacks, more rigid once past the design stage. If a developer wants to change portions or all of it, they would need to go back through the process once again, through staff and through the Planning Commission. There are some confusions between master plan communities, which we don't have in Pullman, mixed-use development, and PUDs. A planned unit development would typically require a third party, such as a planned residential development would require a homeowners association. So density increases are allowed in a PUD, meeting certain requirements as mentioned. Mixed use must be met with underlying zoning densities. The design is essentially locked in once in place, so once again, that flexibility after it's approved really doesn't exist. They may need to start over if certain designs are going to be changed. Mixed use provides mixed use divides property first and fills it with tenants. So for instance, a planned unit development would have certain areas located for commercial uses without a possible tenant. So when those uses are identified, the developer may go out and recruit a certain tenant. For instance, if there was a 1,200 square foot space, there would be certain uses that would be more likely to go in there, like a barber or a coffee shop. Where if it was a larger space under greater acreage, perhaps at say 10,000, maybe it's a grocery store, maybe it's a full service restaurant, something like that. So you may ask, where are some possible locations for planned unit developments in Pullman? If you look at Pullman westerly of Grand Avenue, there are no retail locations. There are no walkable, serviceable retail locations that you could get a gallon of milk, that you could get a cup of coffee. There are some east of Grand, especially when you get closer to campus. So that walkable community would relieve some pinch points in traffic, such as at Main and Grand. The ability for folks to go to services and not utilize a vehicle certainly adds a level of quality to the type of neighborhood that they may want to live in. Newly annexed acreage along the south end of Grand Avenue, acreage that was annexed probably about this time last year. There's 80-some acres on the south end, and that would be a possible location for a large-scale planned unit development where you could have blocks of residential next to blocks of commercial, creating that live-work environment. Or as we would do more work with the airport and we invest more in the airport with infrastructure, that could be a place 5, 10, 15 years down the road where planned unit developments may occur. So there may be some questions. And does council have any further direction?
Thank you. So I think in all of our minds is the structure of Evolve is coming to our minds right now. And I'm understanding that is not a PUD, but it is a mixed use. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you?
Evolve on Main
Oh, okay,
building?
okay. So, yeah, that is a little bit different. That's in a commercial zone, which allows for first floor commercial and then anything above.
Oh, okay.
So a similar type building, but perhaps in a residential zone. Maybe not as tall, but you get the point where it's first
Right.
floor
And-
retail or commercial.
And so with these developments, as has happened, my concern is what's happened with Evolve, where, so when this is going through the process, excuse me, are there tenants actually ready to move in when the building is completed? Or is it like Evolve where we're going to look for them later and hope we get them on the commercial, on the bottom level?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a concern because it hasn't been successful currently, and I don't know if that's because of the price of the rents, or I don't know what it is, but I think that's probably a concern that others may be having too. So is that addressed in the approval process of PUDs?
If there was a tenant already ready to move in, I think that would be easily identified. I think that for the most part, unless the developer already knew what was going to go in, it would be almost more of a speculation build or a speculation location for commercial.
And
I-
does the developer have the control over the rents of the space, of the commercial spaces?
It could be individually purchased, so it may not be the developer renting, it could be
I
purchased
see.
outright.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Or they turned it over to a management company like Evolve, and so there was a client that we met with that was going to go in there as a second tenant, and then the price was a little high for that, so. Nathan, I think you had your hand next, and then we'll go to Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, these have been popular for a little bit, quite a bit. I really like the look of some of them. They do get confusing sometimes. I do have questions, though, about, you know, one of the major questions right now is housing cost. And I'm not sure in your experience, how is it usually higher cost to live in something like this? I know it is more attractive, especially for younger professionals, so on, to have it right there. And as you mentioned, we do have food deserts in certain areas of Pullman, and it makes it difficult for people to access basic needs without traveling a long way. So as far as the cost in your experience?
It's really kind of up to the developer what kind of residential structures he may want to construct. There are some developers that, as you know, are set on the larger single-family homes. Some feel more comfortable developing perhaps townhouses or apartments. So it's really anything that the underlying zone would allow. It could be affordable housing, it could be single-family dwellings.
Okay, yeah, I know it's been very popular. Coeur d'Alene has a few, I believe, and yeah, so thank you, it's a good idea.
You see a lot of them around Seattle University. There's quite a few with all the retail down below and the apartments above. Francis?
And thank you. I think I got 3 questions right now, just as I'm thinking through this. And the first one is just understanding the scenario. You talked about west of Grand, so if we took Sunnyside Hill, and if somebody, you know, halfway into the hill wanted to put in a coffee shop, is that something where someone could do it for an individual building, or is it more designed for an area?
You could do it, well, generally it would be for an area, similar to a planned residential development. I don't know if we want to get down to the small scale of a specific building. With the larger scale, it would give everybody a fair understanding that there may be a commercial use in the vicinity, whereas generally speaking, under our current residential zoning, you know that around you is all going to be residential.
Right.
So that if somebody moving in across the street or next door, they'd understand ahead of time and would get the heads up that there may be a barber shop or a convenience store, something similar, just right across the street or next door.
Okay, so you don't see this as something of our existing build-outs of somebody that wants to drop something into it. This is really designed for new.
This can be used for redevelopment. That's something that I probably should have mentioned in our slide, but with the way that Pullman is growing, I would anticipate this to be a new development situation rather than a redevelopment.
Okay, and then it sounds like from your description, if an area is set up for a PUD, then you would do one SEPA for the whole thing, or so you basically go through the paperwork for the whole build out, even if it takes time to build all the way out.
Correct.
Okay, and then it does sound like each PUD would be unique, as opposed to us having R1, R2, C1, C2. Instead, it would be unique to that area, and within that area, there could be then specifications. I'm thinking about our zoning use chart, where you look at an R1 and what's permitted in an R1, you know, what's permitted in a C1, and things like that. So basically, we would, if one came before us, then at that same time, it would be what type of businesses would be permitted in that area. And I'd imagine, and I think this gets to Councilmember Park's question, there could be a dark store clause as a part of that PUD that they need to fill the storefronts within a certain period of time. So that could be as a part of the process if that was something that council had strong desires on.
Correct. And then also the developer could identify which locations would house which commercial services. So they could utilize that via code covenants and restrictions. And those could be reviewed by council or the planning commission.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Oh, okay. Megan?
So RJ, do we have interest by developers in this concept?
Yes, I've spoken to two that have asked about this, probably more than a year ago. So this has been something that we've talked about internally and just now bringing forward to council. But yes, there are at least two individuals that have asked about this.
Mm-hmm. So in addition to things like the dark store that Councilman Benjamin mentions, can we also say that we want this to be affordable housing, or again, it has to be zoned a certain way, or how restrictive can we make it?
Relative to the cost of the housing?
Yeah.
I think I don't know how to answer that correctly. That's something that's obviously very, I don't want to say touchy, but it's something that is difficult to answer. It's difficult to push a developer towards affordable housing. If the city wanted to do that, we could offer density bonuses or height additions that may not be offered otherwise. So there's ways that the city council, not specifically related to a planned unit development, but residential zoning in general, that we can persuade developers to provide smaller units that may be more affordable, where otherwise they would not consider those because they don't provide the return that they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in that from the perspective of,
That is a conversation that would not be dependent upon planned unit developments, that
Yeah.
we could do that citywide throughout all residential zones.
gotcha. Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. Becky?
I have a question about how density bonuses work. Like, I see that, you get them for open space design factors, those kinds of things, but, so, could you talk a little bit more about that, or maybe give an example?
Sure. We really haven't used any of those with our current planned residential developments because they've already met the current underlying density bonuses. But for instance, if a developer were to include parks or protect sensitive areas like a wetland or a creek, or provide trails, that density could be increased elsewhere to kind of provoke or to encourage that those type of developments happen.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you. All right,
Thanks.
Jana. Interesting. What? Oh, you had another question?
Oh, no, he had a two-part question. One is, if we had questioned the other one, what do we feel about it? And I definitely would be supportive of this. I think that as our city grows and matures, this is another tool that we need in the toolbox to be able to support those that are trying to continue to grow our community.
I guess the only thought I have is around the city council's goal of downtown revitalization. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that? Would this compete in any way, or?
I predict that the residential components, like say west of Grand, as we move westerly as a city, would not compete with downtown. That this really would provide more of a walkable community and would actually may relieve some traffic congestion downtown, so that those going downtown may find an easier pathway to get there. So I don't think that would compete. Perhaps some of the larger scale on south of town, along Grand, that may compete. That's my prediction, but we wouldn't know until they provided some plans or what the details would be. It's hard to predict the future until we can see what the proposals are.
Sure.
Okay, Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think also your point is well taken, but as you mentioned, the food deserts is something that really gets me interested in this, and the attraction for newer residents who do tend to like this type of setup. And so, yeah, I agree. I think this will be an important tool for the future of Pullman, yeah.
For instance, a good example of a large-scale planned unit development, if you've ever been to Issaquah, up on the hill, and I believe it's called the Highlands off of I-90, it's very smartly designed, walkable for the folks that live there, restaurants, grocery stores, athletic department stores, things like that. So that's a good example of a large scale where you wouldn't have the neighborhood market or the neighborhood coffee shop. So if you wanted to have something in mind, that would be a possibility.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, the people that have spoken to you about a possible going forward with the plan, they're talking about raw land development.
Right,
Okay.
right. So there's not going to be a barber shop right next to anybody's houses tomorrow. It would be something in the future and with new development so that we could all look at those compatibilities.
Because as the mayor mentioned, the ones around Seattle U, those were all redevelopments. Yeah, so would there be a way to kind of differentiate? I mean, what if somebody came in and said, I want to buy X, I want to buy the south side of X Hill?
Well, yeah, as we develop the code, if we want to only apply this to new development, we can do that. Or if we want to provide incentives for certain kinds of redevelopment, we can certainly do that. So really, the options are wide. Right now, I'm just trying to gauge if there's an interest before we put a certain number of hours into staff time developing these codes. And it sounds like there's general interest.
I like it.
Great.
Yeah, there's a really nice one in Kirkland, too, that is, and when I was walking around it, I thought, my husband and I said, you would never have to leave here. You have a market and a Barnes & Noble and in eateries and barbershops and, yeah, exactly, clothing stores. It's quite something.
I think of some people that moved over to downtown Seattle, and then all the problems happened in downtown Seattle, and they no longer had that available to them, especially during COVID. Pat?
Just a quick question, RJ. You said that a PRD is a type of PUD
Yes.
earlier on. And so my question is, so this would be a multiple overlay. Could you have a PUD as part of an existing PRD?
No, I think that would be a little much. I think we would just go the PUD route and include whatever type of residential development the developer wanted to do in with the planned unit development. So there'd only be one overlay.
One overlay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really one or the other, not both.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So you got both two parts.
Great. Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks, RJ. Next comes the consent agenda. These items are considered routine in nature, and the council's had a chance to look at these over ahead of time. Do I hear a motion to read by title only?
Second.
Moved and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, Laura McAloon of McAloon Law.
Thank you, Mayor. Your consent agenda consists of a motion to dispense with the reading of the goal-setting minutes of the regular meeting of April 19, 2022, and approve them as submitted. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 106381 through 106399, electronic transfers 57, 58, 844, and 849 through 854, payroll direct deposits numbered 75902 through 76263, voiding payroll direct deposit 75743 totaling $1,417,240.12. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 106400 through 106466 totaling $276,747.77. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 106467 through 106531 totaling $771,401.94. A motion to approve disbursements for utility billing refund checks numbered 106532 through 106578 totaling $6,389.64. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 106579 through 106632 totaling $206,035.04. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 106633 through 106642, electronic transfers 5960 and 856 through 860, payroll direct deposits numbered 76264 through 76614, totaling $941,815.99, and resolution number R-31-22, a resolution authorizing the change order to City of Pullman purchase order number TR084032, adding an electric bus charging station to the standing electric bus order with funding assistance from federal capital grant number PTD 0309.
Any item the council would like to offer discussion? Seeing none, the consent agenda consists of items 1 through 8. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we now go to the regular agenda. Ryan Lancaster is here to talk about a resolution authorizing the execution of a master equity lease agreement between the city and Enterprise Fleet Management. Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. I appreciate this opportunity to present to you. This is a program that I've been working on for a while, and I hope it would be beneficial to the city. But before I get into it, I want to introduce myself. I am Ryan Lancaster. I'm the business manager for maintenance operations. When we established the business division in September of last year, one of the challenges, one of the goals that I wanted to address was looking at ways to reduce our costs in our ERD department, make it more efficient, and running a cleaner, more efficient, fuel-efficient fleet, basically. And so this presentation comes from that, basically that challenge, and I hope that you'll see the benefits in it. And welcome to direction and feedback. So to start off, I want to talk a little bit about ERD, the challenges we're facing, and the goals that we have. Currently, we have some really great mechanics that work for us. They do some amazing things, and they keep our fleet running. But when we look at the actual fleet and look at the vehicles we're running, we see issues that is making our ERD shop less efficient, and our program overall more costly than it needs to be. And so the first challenge that we have is that the age of our fleet. You know, as we look at our light duty fleet, which is about 80 vehicles, it runs about on average the vehicles are about 10 years old. You know, some newer, some older than that. And with this increase in age, we're seeing these vehicles more in our shop. We're spending more on costly repairs. And we'd like to restructure that so that we don't have to see these vehicles as often. Basically, the second challenge we have, and sort of ties in, the first is our shop capacity. You know, currently we don't have a lot of the capacity to address some of the costly, more technical repairs on like buses and dump trucks, and we're forced to sort of outsource those to bigger repair stations, say up in Spokane, like Cummins and whatnot. You know, and as we look at how to save costs, we really need to realign how we're using our capacity so that we're focusing our technician skills in addressing those costly repairs and allow the things that our local vendors can do to help us in that way, sort of shifting that from outsourcing beyond the city to inside the city. And the third challenge we have is the market right now. It's just like parts we're having issues with, vehicles are just hard to come by. And we're anticipating it being very difficult for 2023 to get our vehicles that we need. When we look at how we've purchased vehicles in the past, it just isn't working for us in the current. And we need to sort of look at different alternatives and different ways to approach purchasing vehicles. So, as we have many procurement tools in our procurement toolbox to purchase vehicles. We have a good relationship with vendors in the city, and we enjoy putting out public bids for them to bid on. We have cooperative agreements and state contracts, and all these tools we use to get the best value when we're purchasing vehicles. And so today we want to propose another tool, basically, to add to our procurement toolbox that could potentially add more benefits. And that tool is enterprise services, or enterprise maintenance, fleet maintenance services. Enterprise is a national company. I mean, they are the Enterprise Rent-A-Car. We have a local vendor here, and they have years of experience managing fleets, right? They have the expertise and the knowledge they've gained over applying the same principles to their own fleet that they can offer to cities and other governmental agencies as well as businesses to help reduce our costs. And they have a proven experience working with this. One of the benefits that we have as a government agency, we have a couple of key advantages, I'll say, when we go to purchasing vehicles. We have governmental discounts from manufacturers, and then we have, generally on average, we have pretty low mileage, annual mileage on our vehicles, which when it comes to sell, helps in our selling. But we're not able to fully realize those savings. But as we partnership with Enterprise, there's opportunity to realize more of those advantages in how we buy and how we sell, and really getting the best value for the city. Now, Enterprise offers a full suite of services, fleet management services, from acquisition to maintenance programs, fuel programs, driver training programs, just to name a few. Now, not all of these programs are going to be well suited for us. We had to look at what will serve the city the best. And as we do that, one of the biggest areas that we can benefit from their program is their leasing and financing options. Currently we have leased a few vehicles in the past, but we pretty much buy outright. And the leasing structure that they have provides another avenue that's flexible, and in certain cases can save us a lot of money. So these leases are a little bit different than typical leases that you would see in, like if you were to go down to the dealership. These are called equity leases, and so basically they have a fixed book value, and at the end of the lease, any equity that we gain, or any of the equity over the book value when it's sold, then comes back to the city. And depending on the length of the lease, this can be saved quite a bit. It also, another benefit of these leases is they're open-ended, meaning, if we come to the end of the lease and we find that the market's not advantageous for us to end that lease or sell it, we can extend it, or we can hold it, or we can buy it outright. So we have a lot of options with these leases. So as we look at a leasing program, there's several benefits that we as a city could realize. One of the benefits is that certain classes of vehicles, due to their government incentives, have we find significant cost savings in applying short-term equity leases versus purchasing outright. So I have just one cost of ownership example here, and this is comparing a 22 Ford F-150 over, say, if we were to apply a leasing program versus if we were to purchase that outright. So the leasing program, by running short-term leases, we can possibly reduce our costs significantly versus buying outright. Over those 10 years, we could potentially realize, $40,000 for that one vehicle. The other benefits that we have is there's certain types of vehicles that we need to cycle more often or replace more often. An example of this that we're looking at putting through this program, if it's approved, is a detective vehicle in the police department. That's one that benefits from being replaced more often. And we don't have the buying, selling capacity to make that frequent turnover as cost-effective as if we were to lease on a short-term active lease. The other benefit we could see is there's certain departments that may not have the capital to go out and buy a vehicle, but through the leasing program, they can have smaller annual lease payments. One of the vehicles we're considering for this is potentially a vehicle for the library staff. And so we're in discussions with that, and we'll have to evaluate that. But one of the benefits of these leasing programs is that Enterprise will work with our local vendors for a lot of the services that they can't provide locally. So the delivery, inspection, and potentially even maintenance programs, if we want to go that route, they'll provide those and work with vendors to involve them in those in the process, basically. So I wanted to show an example of I guess a success story with a partnership with Enterprise. I recently is investigating this program. I talked with Jason Conley, Executive Director at City of Pocahontas Parks and Recreation. And I just was asking him his experience with Enterprise and what they found and if they benefited from it. And talking to Mr. Conley, he described a very similar situation in that they had a very aging fleet. In fact, he described that their average age was about 15 years for their vehicles, and they were facing higher repair costs, but at the same time, they didn't have the capital to really reverse that trend. Things were just getting older, and they just couldn't buy enough vehicles to sort of keep up with that. So Mr. Conley worked with the City of Spokane CFO, and they worked with Enterprise to pilot this program within the Parks Department. And they started out with 5 vehicles that they leased from Enterprise. And after the 2-year term, and they ended up selling those vehicles, returning the vehicles to Enterprise. Enterprise sold them. They got the equity back from those sales, and they ended up actually exceeding the amounts that they spent in the lease payments. So they actually gained money. Now, they had a certain market condition which allowed that. In a typical year, we probably wouldn't see that, but we could still apply those same principles to reducing our costs and being able to turn vehicles over quicker with fewer costs. The message that he left with me when I was ending the conversation was that he just said that they deliver, that he was impressed at how well they were able to deliver on sort of the program that they were selling and how much it benefited them as they're now able to run newer vehicles, cleaner vehicles. So in conclusion, I sort of want to take this back to the goals that I talked about for ERD. Excuse me. Enterprise, by utilizing their program, we can make gains in achieving the goals that we're looking to accomplish. As we're running a newer fleet that spends less time in our shop, we can focus more on those costly repairs that we want to keep locally. And we can make that transition from shipping things out to Spokane to shipping things out to Pullman, where our local vendors can deal with them. We also, with Enterprise's expertise, we can be more strategic. They have the market data that can tell us, when's the best time to sell. And it's in their benefit to make sure that we're getting the best prices and making the best life cycle decisions. And then lastly, we want to run a cleaner, more fuel-efficient fleet. I think that's a goal that the City Council has made known that they want to see, and we want to accomplish that, and we want to find ways to run more alternative fuel vehicles and just cleaner vehicles all around, and capitalizing on the new technologies that are coming out more often and staying ahead of the curve. So the recommendation that I'm presenting today is that City Council consider entering into this agreement, this master lease agreement with Enterprise. This agreement just establishes the partnership, and there's no cost associated with this agreement itself. As the market begins to open up for 2023, and we're working with Enterprise to identify what available leases they have, we'll see if it matches our goals and if it will accomplish the cost savings that we wish to see. And at that time, we'll bring a schedule of potential leases to City Council for review, and I can analyze the costs more upfront and see how, and show how they would potentially benefit us. So our first, right now we're going through CIP and we're identifying vehicles that would be good for this program. So our first foray into these lease vehicles will be more of a pilot program, and we're identifying a handful of vehicles that would be good and testing the waters to make sure that they can deliver what they've promised. So with that, I turn it over and would like to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ryan, I appreciate it. It's a lot of information to take in, and for explaining it. What are the downsides? I was doing just a little research as you were talking. I was listening, but I was also doing some research into this. Now, it does look like other larger cities are moving towards these options. So, and you do quite the commercial for Enterprise, I will say. But can you tell me some of the drawbacks? Traditionally, some of these vehicles can go from department to department. And I recall, as I've been on the city council, that's happened several times. So I don't know. I'm trying.
The drawbacks.
Yeah.
The problem with the equity leases is, unlike your traditional equity or traditional lease, the equity lease is sort of at the city's risk, right? So as long as the sell value is over the book value, we get equity back, right? But if it ever drops below, then we actually end up paying. And so there is a certain market risk. Right, but we take that same risk when we buy a vehicle, honestly. And so it's not foolproof, but I think Enterprise's mission is to really identify those times when it's best to sell, because it benefits them as well. The other downside I see, which is mitigated a little bit, is that it takes out the opportunity for our local vendors to bid on as many vehicles. Not fully. There's some vehicles that just won't. It's not right for this program. And we already have several that we're planning to put out a bid as soon as the manufacturers open orders. And we'll put them out for local vendors. And now, while they will have less opportunities to bid, our overall goal, and if you look at, take Just Ford, for example, the amount we support Just Ford a lot more by the amount of vehicles we send out to have repaired or serviced, or than we do actually buying vehicles from them. And, you know, as we look at our total plan, to bring more of those outsourced repairs locally, we hope that sort of mitigates that. And, you know, at the same time, we're saving costs.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Francis?
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. As I understand what this contract is a contract that basically the contract does not require that we ever enter any lease. It's just starts the initial process, so we're not required to enter any lease.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't able to tell, so I'll try to look to Laura. This isn't a sole source to where we could not enter into a similar type of contract with a competitor. Is that correct?
It isn't an exclusive contract.
It isn't an exclusive.
No, and it is subject to annual appropriation. So even if you did enter into leases, there's language in here that says that if the council doesn't allocate funds in the budget to pay for the next year's lease, that we are then released from those leases. There is damages tied to that if there's an additional cost for them, for enterprise to sell the vehicle or they lose money on it. But you have the ability to get out of any lease every year, essentially, through the budget appropriation process.
So this is just an overall one, and then if we were to consider, then they're going to show us what the rates are, and
Right.
that's when
Yep,
we would
it just
consider
sets the
on a
terms.
case-by-case basis.
Yeah, my apologies.
Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
It just sets the terms for all the future leases, basically. And, yeah, like Laura said, there's a non-appropriation clause in there that doesn't tie us to anything. They recognize that we're governed by laws and boards. And what I failed to mention also is that Enterprise Fleet Management Services has been publicly bid through Sourcewell. So it meets all the city procurement policies, and we don't have to go out to bid, but we can utilize that cooperative agreement.
Eileen?
Yeah, you're talking about outsourcing and keeping the technical repairs in-house. This would not in any way affect jobs that the city currently, our people
Nope.
currently hold. It
Nope.
would have
In
no
fact,
effect.
Yeah, we want to, we have very talented mechanics, and we want to get them to training so that they can do more things and provide a better benefit to us. You know, they're fabulous at what they do, and right now we need to outsource in order to maintain our capacity as it is. We can't handle all the jobs that we have currently, and so we'd rather have those jobs locally versus sending them out to Spokane.
Gotcha.
Ann?
Thank you, Ryan, for the presentation. It's really informative. And I know if we do this, we'd be starting out slowly with a few vehicles, but what percentage of our fleet do you foresee our using this agreement for?
Like in the long term?
Yes.
So they really only deal with the light fleet. You know, we have about, 160 vehicles in our fleet, which anywhere from lawnmowers to graders and loaders, right? Our light fleet is about 80. And then of that, you know, a lot of those vehicles are like police cars or trucks with a lot of upfitting. And they might not, we have to evaluate this every year, but they might not play well in that leasing system, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, we're probably looking at about 40 vehicles total that could potentially go into this.
Qualify.
You know, and it also opens up opportunity. You know, we have several charging stations out here, and we'd really like to get a car sharing program for the city staff here that utilize electric vehicles. You know, and this is one avenue that we can pursue that.
Thank you.
Yep.
So how does the insurance work? Because I know Enterprise has its own insurance. We have insurance.
Yep.
And who carries what, and what happens when a vehicle is damaged, and so much for your savings, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they do offer, that's one of the programs they offer, insurance programs. But we would maintain our own insurance, and the agreement stipulates that we insure the vehicle either through them or otherwise. So it would fall just into our standard insurance.
So we could compare rates.
I guess
Whatever
we could.
Enterprise could offer and what we can do ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gives you some more options.
They have a lot of programs, I mean, that we can investigate in the future. Right now, we're just focused on the acquisition portion of it, but.
Any further questions? If not, do I hear a motion on this resolution?
Move to adopt Resolution R32-22.
Second.
Moving second, Laura?
Resolution number R-32-22, a resolution authorizing the execution of a master equity lease agreement between the City of Pullman and Enterprise Fleet Management.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Our next item is a motion to adopt the Pullman City goals and priorities for 2022-2023. You've had a chance to go over these through several meetings and also feedback, and so, Mike, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. So goal setting for the 2022-2023 session, we had goal setting sessions on March 22nd and April 19th in this room with Council. And attached to this document, you will find the goals as they were compiled by the city clerk with the help of Community Development Director RJ Lott and myself, as well as some review from City Council last week when we put out the draft minutes, which you approved earlier this evening on the consent agenda. So we're asking for Council to adopt these goals for the next 2022 and 2023 period. And as part of the discussion during goal setting, Council, I want to point out that this is part of the goal, and how we're taking it is they'd like to have quarterly updates from staff, which I will be providing, as well as in-person, if I just do it by memo, but at least in-person, an update in January for the fourth quarter of the year that just ended. We'll be back in front of City Council for the next goal-setting cycle ahead of the 25-26 biennial budget. So that way we can make sure that Council's goals and priorities are adopted with that budget, just like we're hoping to do with these as the budget call happens here, next month. Whew, that's coming up on us. So we've already been discussing this at the executive management level. Had a meeting today with a couple staffers that had been reviewing this agenda item. They have some ideas they'd like to get working on. So staff's really excited to be able to start working on these. So we're just asking Council to adopt the goals as presented.
Okay, Nathan.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Mike, I know we've been in discussion a little bit, especially because unfortunately last time I was at a Whitman County Economic Development meeting and couldn't make this most recent. And there were two things that I did want to discuss. One was we had discussed about the code of conduct in our city handbook, and that was sent out by Dee last time. I appreciate that, Dee. One thing that it didn't address, and this was something I know we had discussed, was the inclusion of something similar or akin to bullying or harassment type of clause. There's a lot on there as far as legal, but as we've seen nationally, politicians behaving badly. And I think it would be important, an important stance for City Council to add something like that to our handbook, because of course our volunteers, our staff, departments, department heads. They work hard, and whether it's council members in the future or current or anything, whatever would happen, I think that would be a important addition and really help volunteers and our staff to understand that we stand with them. We can be critical, but we can also be, do it in a good way. So I would feel that we should add that. I know this has already been discussed a lot, but as I said before, I was not able to be there. So I wanted to mention that. And then the only other thing was the mental health. I know in here you had mentioned staff, and we have discussed also that having the possibility of an open class for the mental health first aid for community as well, which we had done, I believe it was about 6 years ago. It was extremely popular. It's still discussed by Annie Pillars and the group that I'm a part of. So those are two things that I would at least like the council to have input on.
I defer to council.
Okay, and Parks.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Nathan. I was actually going to speak to the code of conduct as well, and I wholly agree with both points that Nathan made and would like to see them added as well.
Is that something we can just say that, and then have, as we're going through, and have Laura come up with some language that the council could look at later as inclusions into the council handbook,
Yeah. So
as amendments to the code?
I actually have some wording that we could put in, because the initial draft that came to us that we were looking at included the code of conduct, and it dropped out during that. What I'd recommend is review and update the code of conduct for city staff and council members. It keeps it broad, but it lets us then be able to.
Okay. Okay.
Can we have that for all elected officials, so that's just across the board? City staff and elected
Yeah.
officials.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
so review and update the code of conduct for city staff and elected officials, because we have just council members there, you're saying, for all elected.
Yeah.
Elected and appointed, so there's all,
It's elected
Yeah.
and appointed.
I think that should be included there. Okay.
And that one, we had it under enhanced communication, was the section that it was under.
So just adding that language under enhanced communication would take care of that.
Yeah, I think at this point, and help me if I'm wrong here, Laura, I think council would make a motion to adopt the document with amending that particular section with those particular words.
Yes, that would be the process for amending the draft goals that are before you. I did want to point out that all elected officials and volunteers and appointed officials are subject to the city's personnel policies and procedures at all times.
Okay. And the first aid is actually in the language in there, mental health first aid. At least I saw that.
Yeah, it's for staff.
You just want that as part of the, could be part of the amendment to include the community as well?
I'd appreciate that, if it's okay with the council.
I-
Can I ask a
Becky.
question? Yeah, a question about that. When we say include the community, I mean, what does that, I really don't know what that
Make it
means.
available for the community?
Yeah.
Is that what
But
you're saying?
like in terms of cost or like, could you help me envision what this is exactly? I could see where providing this for every citizen of Pullman could be cost prohibitive.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you, if I may, Mr. Mayor. So, as I said, I think it was about 6 years ago, there had been a class. And now, I can't speak to the financial in particular, but there had been a class open to everyone. This was extremely popular. People were certified in this. It was beneficial for everyone. I cannot speak to the cost, but I would say the overall benefit would be, please, sorry.
So this would be like a class that we offer, we just open it to the city of Pullman, when we reach our cap, we're done, or we offer that?
We could have it on Zoom. I mean, with the technology that we have today compared to what we had.
I think Eileen was first.
Okay, Eileen.
Yeah, I could see this under the enrichment classes that we have in our rec department. So it could be advertised with the mechanisms that we already have. And then I think Zoom is a possibility also, and then we could monetize it to some degree to defray our expenses. Because if we do have them in person, well, there's a cost to everything, obviously.
Yeah.
Then it could be in a controlled environment. We could use facilities within the rec department and our conference rooms or whatever, and defray that cost through the registration fee.
Francis.
And Mayor, what I was going to suggest, under the current goals it written, is provide annual mental health first aid training for city staff. If we just struck for city staff, then it's provide annual mental health first aid training.
And then we can interpret later.
And then the staff would understand that we'd like it in a way that it's available to the community.
But shouldn't we state that? So it would say to staff, elected and appointed officials, and be made available to the community or something like that? I mean, should we delineate that out, or?
Probably should have some kind of a clause, just like in terms of the cost. Okay.
Yes, I think we're talking about two different things. We're talking about staff training requirement, an annual
Right.
staff training requirement, staff
Okay.
and elected, appointed staff training requirement.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And then having it as an enrichment class through Parks and Rec as a separate thing.
So would we add the enrichment class in a different spot and leave the state training the way it is? The state training?
Yeah, the in-house training for city staff and electeds, that would be one thing. And
Right.
then sending it out to the community under the rec registration program. That way we capture that information too. So that's almost as important as, yeah.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Mike, under other priorities, 1, 2, 3, the fourth bullet down where it says provide diversity, equity, and inclusion training for city staff, should we also include electeds in that, or council members, at least as this is a new activity that we're starting? I think it would be important for
Which I think is something that
us
we
to
did
be
agree to.
involved.
Yeah.
But it's not, it doesn't say
know.
that.
If that is something the council would like to consider, I would also encourage you to include our boards and commissions as well.
Yep,
Elected and
Okay.
appointed.
elected and appointed.
Okay, that works for me, but I thought we were more inclusive when we were discussing this than just city staff. I think we kind of made a broader reference there, so however you want to word it is fine with me, but
I would, again, defer to the council. How would you like to word it with an amendment to what was presented?
So I think
I
Pat
think
just
Francis
added
is
the words
taking
right to
notes.
it. City staff, including council and elected,
And
elected and appointed.
Elected and
Elected
appointed
and
officials.
Yeah. Okay. And did you want to, did you have some wording?
I could do that with the first aid training. How did we provide annual mental health first aid training available to staff and public, or?
Staff, and then work with the recreation department to make it available to the general public.
Do you want that whole thing in the
Can-
goal? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
2 points.
Right.
I think it should be 2 points, so that, yeah, because I'm seeing the look on Dee's face, and she's like, going, how am I supposed to put this on the paper?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's 2 separate points.
Yeah. Well,
Yes, we got-
that was
yeah.
why I was saying just drop the for city staff, and then it's the staff understands that we want
Yeah.
it available to the
We-
community.
we've-
But if it's important for us in the goals to communicate to the community that's available, then we need to.
And I'd like the flexibility, because we can come back and watch this discussion, but I'd like the flexibility before you assign that to the recreation staff to let us look at what other opportunities we have to funnel that through.
I think, sorry, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think it, just in general, so that the spirit is that it's open to everyone, and that is the spirit of it. Now, I'm not as good with the wording as Eileen or Francis here, but that's the real spirit of it, and that's what the community has told me is extremely important.
I understand.
If we were to insert the word citywide, so provide citywide annual mental health first aid training. Okay?
yeah.
No, that's why I'm asking the question.
We need to have it divided off, and I like Eileen's suggestion that the rec department handle the public part.
I agree,
That's
and that
clear.
might be the direction we'd go. I just really would like the flexibility.
Yeah.
To see if that's where this goes, instead of us coming up with a different idea, but being tendered by these words that the
They have
rec's
the
got to do it.
expertise, they have the experts in the community, and they work with them all the time for the rec program, so.
So city rec department to provide annual mental health? Or do we want to, is this going into a goal or not, or just?
I think it should be a goal, but I take Mike's point that I don't know that we need to name or identify how we're going to provide it. It's just a goal that we want to provide it into the community, and then the staff can decide where best that would happen. Is that kind of what you were saying, Mike?
Yes.
Just having the option.
Right.
So we are not defining that it's going to happen in parks, in the recreation department if something else works better inside the city.
I think it's also important that we recognize that there is specific first aid training where you're certified in first aid, mental health first aid training. It's not just we're bringing in a, mental health care provider.
Right.
I mean, this is, as I sent the information to you, Mike, this is a NAMI, National Association on Mental Illness. This is a part of their program. And so when we provide that education, that it is a part of that. We're not just bringing somebody in to teach us about it. This is,
And
If
so is
that's
this-
how the council feels, then I
Is
would
this
like.
something we could collaborate, for example, with WSU on?
Because WSU does provide this.
That's what I'm saying.
So-
So instead of saying Parks or Recreation's going to do it, that's another possibility to be explored.
yeah.
Make it available to the community, and we can work the details out later.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what we said, yeah.
So
It's a goal.
provide annual mental health first aid training for the community.
I think Councilmember Weller wants a specific training, and I think if that's how council feels, you should probably name it in your motion as well. Otherwise, it leaves it up to our
Well, mental health first
jurisprudence
aid-
to find if this is the best, or
That's the mental health
this
first aid
makes
training.
most sense, or if the other one's cost prohibitive. We haven't researched this yet in its totality, but it sounds to me like Councilmember Weller wants a specific training.
And I have those resources as I sent it to yourself, and the last trainer was down from Spokane who was certified in this, and that, like I said.
So we wouldn't change the current goal referencing city staff. What we do is we add this additional one that is provide annual mental health first aid training for the community.
Yeah.
And I did receive Councilmember Weller's information. I just haven't had a chance to weigh it against any other program out there yet.
Right. Eileen?
I think we need the words, provide a program for mental health first aid training to the public. Because if you just say, we're providing it, it sounds like it's a free service. So if we say provide a program, I think it gently implies that this will be something that you will sign up for, and there will be perhaps a fee attached. To make it clear.
Provide program,
Provide a
Provide
program,
in mental health
first aid.
there we go, and mental, Okay.
Okay.
With that, is there anyone else? If not, I move that we adopt, is there a resolution?
No, it's just
Okay,
no.
City Council goals and priorities for 2022 through 2023 with the following edits. Under enhanced communication, change the last, the review and under enhanced communication, add a goal, review and update code of conduct for city staff and elected and appointed officials. Then, under other priorities, the goal that is provide diversity, equity, and inclusion training for city staff, add to that and elected and appointed officials. And then add a goal under other priorities that is provide a program in mental health first aid training for the community.
Second.
Moving second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. With that, we come to new business. Is there any new business to come before the council tonight? Seeing none, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moving second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?